Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Bloomington Chamber Town Talk. We'll probably wait a minute or so to get started as people are entering this Zoom meeting. As you can see, we have a slide up just to talk about some housekeeping. So you'll be muted. If you do have questions, if you have some right now, go ahead and type them in either the chat or if there's a Q&A feature on your toolbar, and we'll get to as many of them as we can, and hopefully have a really lively discussion. Oh yes, as the text says, I'm Brent Pavia, president of the Bloomington Chamber, and I'm looking forward to this discussion. I should mention one of the things that I've missed a great deal. We've all had quite a turbulent year this year, and it's varied, of course, across the board. And looking forward to hearing from Chief Potts and Officer Brown on how it's affected the Bloomington Police Department and public safety. But one of the things that I've really missed is our partnership in programming business matters, safety matters, and really enjoyed getting together in person for that. But we're kind of wrapping a lot of that discussion today in our under our programming of Bloomington Chamber Town Talk, our last one of the year. So really looking forward to this discussion. And as we get started, I do want to encourage you, if you're the social media types, to take advantage of some of those hashtags below, hashtag Bloomington Town Talk, at Bloomington Chamber, as we try to get the word out about what we're doing and this program in particular. All right, I also like to acknowledge our sponsors, because without them, we wouldn't be able to put on the programming that we do, and very thankful for the Mall of America, in addition to Centerpoint Energy, Wells Fargo, and Xcel Energy for their continued support of this program in particular, Chamber Town Talk. So I'm sure we'll get some people who will jump on this as we go along, but I want to get right to it and talk and hear from our experts in terms of Bloomington public safety, because I know we have a lot to talk about. And again, as I said, I don't want to dominate. I could ask questions all morning long, but really want to hear from you as well. But I'm just going to open it up with a really kind of broad. I mentioned a little bit how this has been one crazy year, and not just because of the pandemic, but civil unrest and all sorts of things. So my first question to both of you, and take it wherever you'd like, is, you know, how are you doing? How are you doing personally and professionally? And you know, we'll go from there. But just that general overview from each of you. So whoever would like to start.
Well, I'll kick it off, and then we'll turn over to Eric. Just want to say good morning to everybody on the call. It's great to see some of you. I can see faces, others I can just see your name, but it's great to see good participation from our chamber members and guests. It's been an interesting year, I'm sure, for you all in the law enforcement community. It's been no different. I think, you know, I've told people in the last several weeks that this has been probably one of the most challenging years that I've ever had in my almost 30-year law enforcement career, just because, you know, with the COVID-19 pandemic, on top of that, we dealt with civil unrest, and then another resurgence of COVID has kind of made the year just a real roller coaster ride for us. So in general, I think we are, as an organization, we're doing well, all things considered. Personally, I think, you know, it's been just a challenging year, a bit of a roller coaster with different kinds of issues to try to deal with. But again, all things considered, I think personally I'm doing well, and the organization's doing well as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to Erica to have her answer that question, then we can move on.
Good morning, and thanks for everyone for being here. And I recognize a bunch of names, so thank you. I see my Donaldson crew here. It's like a couple of hotel people. So I'm doing well too. And we were kind of discussing it earlier before this meeting started, but I had COVID. You're in the top 100 or 200, two of my partners and I, the first 200 in Minnesota to get it. So we got sick when it was kind of newer. So we were kind of the experimental people. But as far as, now I'm healthy. We've, like the chief said, we've been really busy this year dealing with some new topics, some new kind of scenarios that we haven't seen before just because of COVID and some of the civil unrest. And my job being in the crime prevention unit, and I deal with businesses, it's made my job, it's kind of put a spin on my job with some of the stuff that I've had to deal with, which we can get into later. So I've been really busy. Normally I work in the office. I'm working from home today, but so yeah, things are good. Things are busy. We're staying healthy and just dealing with the changes as they come and trying to stay on top of everything. So.
Great. Well, and I could tell, that Chief Potts is in the office because wearing the mask, and that is probably a protocol for any employee right now at City Hall and in the police department when you're in the office. How has the dynamics of COVID affected your working world? I mean, what's different? It's been not only like when you're in the office, but when you're out in public, and you can't always maintain social distance. So how has that changed?
Well, thanks, Brent. COVID has, it's I think affected us in a lot of different ways, and probably the most obvious to the community is our officers are required to wear PPE when they're interacting with the community, particularly when they're within 6 feet. And so what that means is if they're out driving their squad, just the fact that they're driving it, they wouldn't have to have PPE on. Most of our officers are working 10 or 12-hour shifts. So what they have to do, though, is when they are going to make contact is put on a mask, goggles, gloves, that kind of thing. And in some cases that works out just fine. In other more kind of dynamic situations, that's a bit of a challenge. We have had, as Erica mentioned, she had COVID. 2 of her partners in the crime prevention unit also had it. And then there's probably been about another 10 or 12 additional members of the department that, and then additional non-sworn members as well. And anytime we have a COVID positive case or an exposure, as you all know, it means you have to quarantine or self-isolate. And so at any given time, it seems like we're rolling through vacancies, and that creates some challenges for staffing, right? So we're doing I think, honestly, we're doing as much as we can to limit exposure, significant exposures within the workplace and by the PPE protocols. But it just, as I'm sure with many of your organizations, it's very tough to keep that from, rearing up during your, within the workforce. So that's been a challenge. Early on, back in April, May, and June, we switched our whole department to a new schedule with the idea that we'll have them work a series of days on and then have a longer stretch of days off, so that if they contracted the virus or if they had an exposure, they could self-isolate essentially on their days off. And that actually worked really well. But then, as you probably remember, COVID kind of, it didn't go away, but especially during June, July, August, it became slightly lesser of an issue. And maybe that was a mistake that we made, that we probably should have kept up our diligence. But we transitioned back to our normal schedule, and we've been in that ever since. And we've been able to manage the vacancies. Just luckily, with our strict PPE protocols, I think we've reduced the spread as much as we can, and we've been able to handle that. So. But I'll tell you, and it'll turn over to Erica after this. The one thing it's done is it's limited our ability to do community engagement work, in-person community engagement work, which is, that's a challenge, because I think we pride ourselves on doing a lot of that to try to build and strengthen relationships in the community. But we've replaced it with virtual sessions similar to this. Erica can speak a little bit more to that. And kind of anecdotally, what I've heard is, as we all have gotten used to this kind of virtual world of video conferencing and video meetings on several different platforms, at first, I think we were all a little bit uncomfortable with it, but I think we've gotten more obviously used to it. and more used to the technology. And so in some ways, our ability to connect with the community in a virtual way has been a positive. We've been able to do, in certain cases, more of it than we have by relying on in-person meetings. So I think that's kind of the bulk of how it's impacting us as an organization. Erica, do you want to hit a little bit more on how your interactions with the business community have gone?
Definitely. So, when COVID happened, that kind of shook us all a little bit, not really knowing how to respond initially. But when the civil unrest happened, I have just kind of to back up a little bit, I run the Business Watch. So it's kind of similar to the Neighborhood Watch, where I just have several business contacts. I know not every single one in Bloomington, but I have business contacts, and I send out either weekly or bi-weekly any kind of information through email, such as kind of department info, any community engagement info, crime trends. So if there's something that we're seeing, like a catalytic converter thefts from auto, something that we're seeing a big increase, I'll give that information out to everyone on my business watch list. So during COVID, during the pandemic, when the civil unrest kind of happened right after COVID hit, and I know it mostly hit Minneapolis, but a lot of businesses reached out to me at that time, and they were worried about, are we gonna see some of the stuff Minneapolis saw, some of the looting, some of the rioting? Are our businesses in danger? What are some ways that we can keep our businesses safe? What are ways that I can keep my employees safe? Whether it's from, some of the increased activity we've seen, whether it's from some of the response in Minneapolis. So, I like to say that, we have a really good partnership with our businesses in Bloomington, and just having that relationship, having that constant, communication really helps both the police department and the business. I think it goes both ways. We get a lot out of having that partnership with our businesses, whether it's, asking for assistance. Our people out in our community are eyes and ears many times. If we're looking for someone, I send out bolos, be on the lookouts often for vehicles or people we're looking for. So we get a lot of good feedback from our businesses, from the community. And at the same time, I like to think that when businesses have a partnership with us, that we can, because I know a lot of people at businesses, they don't necessarily want to call 911. They just have a question on, what are some safety tips that I can do to secure my building? We have situations like a panhandler or a homeless person in the lot. How can I deal with that? Some people hesitate to call 911 because they don't, if it's not an emergency, they feel like, they don't want to use that number. So oftentimes I'm that good link, I'm that good liaison at the police department, where if people just have questions on, whatever safety, anything regarding business or the community or the police department. So I'm someone that businesses can reach out to. So, and that it grew a lot during the civil unrest, and, businesses were shaken up along with our entire community. So it's really benefited both sides having that partnership, and it's continuing to grow, which is great. I hear from my business contacts daily, and I do whatever I can to give them the best service to keep them safe in Bloomington.
Yeah, no,
Brent,
yeah.
Brent, do you mind if I tack on? I think it's probably relevant for this question that we cover. One of the other, challenges that we faced during this 2020, and it's, primarily related to COVID-19, but there's a variety of factors I think that are kind of contributing to it. And that is, so around April or May, and this is, obviously the kind of the early stages of the pandemic, the governor and others kind of made some decisions that ultimately led to some of the homeless shelters, the congregate care homeless shelters being closed down or significantly reduced the volume of their population that could stay there. And so what that led to was some hotels in Bloomington became kind of makeshift homeless shelters. And it started with a couple of Holiday Inns that were basically contracted by Hennepin County. And then it grew from there into probably up to close to a dozen at probably the peak of other hotels that were used. And typically what would happen is a nonprofit organization who was trying to kind of help the homeless population would rent or approach a hotel and rent a block of rooms, and they would then occupy the hotel. And then there was a third scenario where, because of, and I think I saw on the sign-up sheet some of our hotel folks, hotels present on the call here, but obviously with COVID, the hotels had significant vacancy rates. And so some of them had kind of chose to reduce their rates, and to a point where they were significantly reduced, and they kind of became a place where some of our homeless population could go to and spend time, obviously separated from other groups or not living in a congregate care. So we're really kind of juggling three different scenarios, one being contracted hotels by Hennepin County, the second group being nonprofit groups renting room blocks, and the third was just a significantly reduced room rate. Well, in many of these situations, it led to an increase in police calls. We began, and really Erica has been our main liaison for this work. I know she and I and a lot of us at the department have learned an awful lot about managing and dealing with the homeless population over the last 10 months. But Erica has been kind of our quarterback and leader of this work. And where we see increases in the police activity, we also got calls and complaints from surrounding businesses, neighborhoods. We would then quickly try to start working with the hotel management if there was a nonprofit involved in trying to address those issues proactively. And I can say now, as we were in, about mid-December, we have learned a whole lot. We figured out, some ways to better manage that situation. Hotels are obviously a big part of that solution, but also are the nonprofit organizations that are kind of renting the room blocks. But the biggest and most important thing is that when an organization starts to use a hotel as a shelter for homeless folks, that they have to really assess what additional supports, whether that be social services or security. We call it kind of wraparound supports. Those are really, really important to, safely and effectively running, in some cases, a hotel as a homeless shelter. And when they do that, when they bring in the proper supports and additional kind of services, we see a significant drop in the police activity and complaints from the surrounding neighborhoods. And that's kind of where we're trying to get with these organizations that are running, currently still running these shelters in our hotels. So Erica, do you want to talk a little bit about how you work with the hotel staff and the nonprofits when we start to see an increase in activity at the hotels?
Yeah, so it started back months ago, like the chief was saying, around April, where, part of my job duty, or I guess part of what I do every morning, is I run calls for service. So any call that my partners went to the previous night, I always look through them, see if we have repeat addresses, repeat people we're dealing with. And then I take it upon myself to follow up to see, is there something that we could be doing different? What are some ways? I'll work with the business or the homeowner. What are some ways we can reduce calls? Is there some other resource you're needing? That's maybe more appropriate for the situation going on or for the reason we're responding. And we noticed early on that some of our hotel calls just skyrocketed, our calls for service. And some of them even increased by 300% from last year at this time. So we compared kind of month to month of this year to the previous year, and we saw a huge increase. So I reached out to the hotels that we saw that kind of staggering number, that staggering increase, and we discovered that we, like the chief mentioned, we had some shelter hotels in our community. And this is something new to Bloomington. We haven't dealt with this before. So to tackle that, same thing like I do normally with businesses. I reached out to the hotels. just talk to management, talk to the owner, and just discuss ways that, you know, how are we operating this homeless shelter? What are your needs? How can we respond? What can we do to assist you? And, you know, and that would include giving suggestions on how to secure your building maybe more efficiently. Are there ways that, you know, you can have one entrance into the hotel? Do you have security? What kind of things are security looking for? What are your expectations for these shelter residents? So, and I know 2 of our Hennepin County hotels, they had a contract for all of their residents, and that included, you know, no drinking, no drugs, no visitors, no criminal activity out in the community. And these residents had to sign these contracts. And any kind of violation of the contract, either they'd get a warning or they would be asked to leave. So that was a very good model that the Hennepin County hotels used. Once we established a relationship with these hotels, talking to Hennepin County Security, who were the primary security for our two Holiday Inns, that really, the numbers kind of leveled off. We saw calls decrease, and we maintain this partnership, and it really kind of helped the calls for service. With some of our other hotels like Comfort Inn and some of the other hotels on the east side where we have other nonprofit groups, it was just basically ensuring that, you know, are these people provided services? And some of the nonprofit groups had services provided, some didn't. And a lot of times this was very apparent with our calls for service. We'd see an increase in calls such as crisis or mental health, some kind of even non-criminal, but definitely something that police respond to. And that's just a matter of reaching out then to that service or to that nonprofit group and saying, you know, these are the type of calls we're seeing. Is there some service? Is there another resource that we can provide your shelter residents in order to get them the help they need? And, you know, this will help the residents at the hotel. This will help the police officers maybe kind of better understand what these people's needs are. So it was a lot of partnership. It was a lot of WebEx meetings. We're still going through it. I know the chief and I are on at least 2 or 3 standing meetings a week with every type of resource involved. So that's, you know, city staff, that's hotel staff, that's shelter staff. We have Hennepin County, and we even have some state representatives. And this is new to all of us. All of these entities are working together just to combat these issues that we've seen that started about 8 months ago. So it's still a work in progress. And we actually are making a lot of progress just with a better understanding of how these shelters work and how these hotels are operating has given us a lot of information too on how we can, you know, respond as well. And all the information that we're learning on a weekly basis, we give to our patrol officers, since they're the ones actually going to the hotels, responding to the scene. So, and a lot of the information that we give, you know, helps patrol by just letting them know that, you know, we're working with the hotel owners on different ways that we can decrease calls for service. So it's a work in progress. And I know some of the activity from the hotels and from this homeless population that has increased, it does spill over to our community. Businesses are getting calls for panhandlers, for some of the homeless maybe sleeping in stairwells if they're not allowed, or one of the shelter residents. We're seeing more homeless kind of on our American Boulevard corridor. So that's increased calls for service at nearby businesses. And, you know, the shoplifting and some of the crime has just increased because of that. So we're aware of it. You know, we're fully staffed. We're having our officers do a lot of extra patrolling in our kind of higher call area, our higher crime area. We have our officers based. So it's, we're using every resource we can. We have a I'm working with an officer from transit. They have a HAT team, which is a homeless action team that really just focuses on homeless. So we're getting every resource we can to combat this.
Yeah, I think, you bring up, well, first of all, I think Officer Brown, you're probably going to have even more of connections after this call for people contacting you about some of these things, because I think it is a little confusing about, well, is this really a 911 call, or where do I go? And you're kind of the point people for for all of that, and you do have that connection to those wraparound services, to our social service network and that sort of thing. But I'm curious too, and maybe Chief Potts can answer this. I mean, perception does become reality to a certain extent, but what is true in terms of, crime statistics and safety? I mean, it's a different world when most people are at home all the time or have a different perspective. I'm sure there are people in my neighborhood who are like, why is he here all the time, and what's he doing? There's got to be some of that too. What's the reality in terms of public safety in Bloomington currently?
Yeah, that's a great question, Brent. And I see Councilmember Nelson and Jamie Verbrugge, our city manager. We have tried to, message out our actual crime statistics, and we know that there's some perceptions out there because there have been a number of what we'll say are kind of higher profile crimes. I'll start off with the good news. In both what we call serious crime or part 1 crime and part 2 crime, we are down in somewhere between 15 and 20% in the serious crime category, and somewhere around 25% in the part 2 category. So serious crime down 15 to 20%, lesser serious or part 2 crime is down somewhere 25% or even maybe more. We're still waiting for our through November statistics to come through and be final. But that's the good news. So, as we talk about perception and reality, the reality is crime to date is down. And so what is affecting the perception, though, as I mentioned, there's been some higher profile. So, for example, in the part 1 or serious crime categories, that includes homicide. Now, our normal average number of homicides per year in Bloomington is 1. So far this year, we've had 6, and we've had an additional 2 attempted homicides. All of those cases are essentially closed cases at this point. That means we've located or identified the perpetrator or the suspect responsible for the crime. And I will say that, unfortunately, these are almost entirely domestic related homicides. That is, that the person that is responsible for the crime and the person who was killed have some kind of a relationship. They either live together, they're related, or they're definitely acquaintances who have a relationship with each other. So we have worked with Cornerstone to message this. So we haven't had a significant increase in domestic, assault calls, but unfortunately we've seen this significant increase in these homicides. So there's no real trend other than the fact that these are people that know each other. They're in a relationship. They may be related. In one case, it was a husband and wife. Another case, it was a boyfriend, girlfriend, a mother and son relationship. But in some form or fashion, they're related. Other areas within part 1. So part 1 includes homicide, vehicle theft, aggravated assault, which means an assault with a weapon. That's what aggravated assault is. Rape or criminal sexual conduct, burglary, arson, robbery, theft is included in part 1, and human trafficking. We have an overall, like I said, about 25% decrease in those categories at the aggregate level. But the really big driver in our part 1 crime numbers is theft, and theft is down significantly. We have on a typical year somewhere between 2,000 or so of those calls through the month of October, and this year we're only at 1,600. So theft is a big driver in part 1 crime. So that one's down significantly. And that's probably the result of a lot of our retail areas were closed for significant portions of the year. But we have seen in the area of vehicle theft, we've had an increase in vehicle thefts, about 25%. So that's, just to give you some scope there, there's around 160 or 170 vehicle thefts so far this year. Criminal sexual conduct or rape calls, those have been trending about 15 to 20% higher than last year. Burglary, about 15% higher than last year. And the rest of the categories, arson, robbery, as I mentioned, theft, human trafficking, have been down significantly. So that is the crime picture. Calls for service do affect, and where people see police cars going on a regular basis does affect perception. I think Erica mentioned this or alluded to it in her comments, that we've seen some pretty significant increases in calls for service at some of those hotels. That doesn't mean that there's, necessarily all of those police calls are the result of crime that has been committed. In fact, actually, one of the significant drivers in the calls for service at these hotels where we have our homeless population is that there's been a significant amount of medical situations, which typically leads to a police response, maybe a fire response, and obviously an ambulance if needed. So we continue to see at some of these hotels a significant medical call rate. That is not a crime. That's obviously not a call that involves a crime, but police response is required. There's not a whole lot that we can do about the medical responses or the volume of medical responses. And really where Erica spends her time with the hotels is trying to come up with strategies to reduce the police calls for example, unwanted person calls. That's a large number of them. Disturbance calls, those are some of the higher categories of calls. And in working with the hotel, the management of the hotel, in certain cases, that means, additional security staff on site or locking exterior doors so that, for example, some of these people who are not wanted at the property, they can't simply go to another door and get in. And I think that's been some of the most impactful work that Erica has done, is working with the hotel staffs to really come up with strategies to kind of better protect and provide security services to these hotels where the homeless populations are staying. But overall, the good news is crime rates are down. There are categories that are concerning. We're watching them very closely. There hasn't been, again, I go back to these homicides, a trend where we can say, hey, this is a particular strategy that we want to employ that will reduce it, because unfortunately these are domestic situations where the people are known to each other, and very, very unfortunate and tragic. I am, at least on the positive side, happy to report though that we have been able to locate all of the individuals that we think are responsible for these cases, and so there's not an ongoing threat to the community. That our investigators have done a great job at kind of closing the cases as they occur. So
great. Yeah, and I don't know if you saw it or not, but in the chat, Officer Brown did leave her contact information, and we'll follow up with that. And we also encourage you to ask some questions of Officer Brown and Chief Potts. Just to follow up a little bit more on the auto thefts, is that I know that regionally that's been there's been an increase. Is that can you speak more about that in terms of one, is that identified to kind of, or thought to be part of certain groups? Is there, and then other than the obvious, what can be done to kind of help mitigate that?
Well, I'll just respond initially, and then Erica, who I'm sure has tracked it even closer than I have. I just want to make sure we kind of distinguish. Now, last week, there was some media attention on situations that were involved carjackings. Most of those cases, I should say a significant amount of those cases of a carjacking, which is a vehicle stolen from someone with force used or a weapon implied. A typical auto theft is that you go out to get in your car, sometime during the day and it's gone. Different from a carjacking, which is it's taken from you while you're in the car. We have not seen the carjacking numbers increase. I think our totals as of Monday or Tuesday were 2 or 3 in 2020, which is a fairly, that number is consistent with years past. I think we're actually at 2, and there may have been a third, but Minneapolis has seen a dramatic increase in those. Now, what we have seen in response to the carjacking situation is that we have made a number of recoveries of those cars that were stolen in Minneapolis in Bloomington, and they have been recovered in parking lots, typically along the American Boulevard corridor or at the Mall of America. But the typical auto theft situation in Bloomington is, I think, over 50% of these vehicles is stolen with the keys in the car. It is a crime of opportunity, typically, we tell the community. And if you simply remove the keys, we think we could reduce our auto theft rate by a significant amount. But over half of these cases, the keys are left in the car's left running, and all of a sudden the car then drives away with someone in it. And so there's I think from a trend standpoint, we've just seen more of them occurring this year. So Erica, do you want to shed more light on or add more detail to the auto theft situation here in town?
Yep, that's absolutely correct. Yeah, luckily it's very rare to have a violent carjacking. Every report that I've read, or I would say the majority of reports I read involving a car theft is someone leaving the keys in the car. Keys in the car running. Lots of times it's kind of in between a civil issue and a criminal issue. We have a lot of people saying, I let my friend, drive my car once, and then, 2 weeks later, that same friend took my car. And so that's kind of dancing on the line of civil, but we'll still take the reports. So a lot of the auto thefts from Bloomington, a lot of them are preventable. So that's just a constant reminder to the community, to our businesses. Here's a reminder: don't leave your keys in the car. Don't leave your car running. I know some fobs now you can leave your key, or you can leave your car running, but then take your fob out if that's what you want to do. But like the chief said, with crimes of opportunity, because of the fact we do see some increased calls for service with certain criminal activity, with some of the increased, I don't want to say it's a certain type of person always doing it, but with some of the busier areas on American Boulevard corridor, I just think, some people just can't turn away from that opportunity if they see keys in a car. So some of it's preventable. The legit, there's no keys in the car was left parked and locked. That's a little bit harder. We do see some of those too. Some people who are pretty savvy with cars, they're able to make that happen. But for the most part, they're preventable. And we do have some of the civil issues, but we do see, I would say we have more recovered stolens than actual stolens out of our city. So a lot of hotels are seeing the recovered stolens. And like the chief said, at the Mall of America. So they're usually stolen out of other cities that end up in Bloomington.
Well, and one of the things I was thinking about in particular with businesses, maybe this kind of goes back to too much TV that I watch or something, but is cameras and security systems in both public and private spaces, and in particular businesses. Do businesses for the most part, have good security systems, and are you able to access them in your efforts on a regular basis?
Some businesses do. Lots of times businesses will ask me, what are the best ways to keep my business and my parking lot secure? Cameras are good. I wouldn't say they're the best deterrents. Some of these criminals nowadays, I don't think they could care less if there's a camera.
Especially
cameras, yeah. Cameras are used a lot as an investigative tool. It's after the fact that a crime occurs. And businesses are always, they're more than happy to turn over their surveillance. So we'll review the camera footage or the surveillance from the crime, but even if we have a clear as day face right in front of us of a person who stole a car or committed a crime at the business, unless we have an identification to match the face, it's still, we'll put out different alerts to the Metro, to our partners. But if we can't ID the person, it's that clear picture isn't very helpful. So a lot of times I tell my businesses, when it comes to parking lots, bright lights are really good. As bright as is legal, I guess, in Bloomington. I know we have a lumen or a different ordinance, but bright lights, if your budget allows, have some security, lock your doors. Those are all helpful too. Obviously cameras, it's always good to have them, but they're not the best deterrents. They're more of an investigative tool.
Good to know. There was that question about, does Bloomington also have an ordinance about against leaving a vehicle running and unattended?
I don't believe so. I'm not sure, Chief, if you're aware. I don't think there's an ordinance.
Well,
I think it's
the challenge is enforcement of it when you, as we're driving through the community, unless it's winter and you see, the tailpipe is, got a lot of smoke coming out of it. It's pretty tough to go out and actively enforce. Now I think Erica is, in crime prevention in general, has long been communicating to folks to, if you're going to leave your car running, don't do it with the keys in it or keys in the ignition. I mean, there's newer vehicles have the ability to be started remotely, but the keys aren't in it. And as soon as somebody tries to open the door, that deactivates it. But the real challenge is the situations where people just, simply leave the car running with the keys in the ignition, or in other cases, they just leave the keys in the center console. And I mentioned earlier that we have about a 15% uptick in our burglaries. And this is another situation where these are crimes of opportunity, where unfortunately there are people that are going out and intentionally looking for, opportunities to commit crimes. And sadly, those cases that are true stolen cars and not, as Erica mentioned, kind of a civil dispute, or someone borrowed the car and didn't return it. That's actually a significant portion of those auto theft numbers. But the cars that are actually stolen, this is cases where people are going around and they see the keys, and that then leads to this crime occurring. And similar to these burglars, where they're driving through neighborhoods and they may see an open garage door overnight, and they go in and they're, take some items from within the garage, and rarely, but occasionally, they'll actually enter the home as well. So just a message to the community that, to the extent possible, remove the opportunity by closing your garage, locking cars when they're in your driveway, certainly not leaving keys in them. And we think, collectively as a community, if we can kind of remove these opportunities, we'll see crime decreases. It's just, and I get it, sometimes people just forget, and, bad things happen. But the more we can get the message out about removing the opportunity and making it not so easy for these crimes to occur, we think that'll have a positive impact as well.
Sure. Shifting gears a little bit, I know, resources are always a challenge. And this year in particular, as the city has been looking at, at budget questions and enlisted the volunteer work of a budget advisory committee, and is now looking to kind of finalize things for 2021, and really making sure to maintain resources for public safety in Bloomington as a top priority. But I'm sure it's never enough. And so I guess I'm asking, what are some challenges and concerns around your need currently, and maybe projecting a little bit into the future?
Yeah, good question. As you mentioned, as I'm sure has been the case with many of the folks on the call today, this has been a rough year from a budget standpoint for the city of Bloomington, the businesses within Bloomington, and frankly, the residents within Bloomington. I'm sure many of them have been affected, by the COVID pandemic in a financial way. And so the city's, main impact has been because of the significant reduction in hotel stays and volume of traffic at the mall and other places that contribute to liquor and lodging tax revenues, admission revenues, and in a few cases, even property tax revenues. It's been a challenge for the city. And as you mentioned, the city council and our city manager, working with the citizen advisor, what's it called, CBAC, Citizen Budget Advisory Committee, I think is the title, worked through a very challenging situation here, and frankly, I think came up with a very good and comprehensive end product that was submitted to the city council. And I think this past Monday night, they've come to agreement on what they're going to do going into 2021. And I think that is ultimately a 2.75% tax levy increase. And so I give credit to the folks who had to work through those challenges. And I think, as you also mentioned, I think the consensus from the CBAC committee and messaging from the community is that they want to see public safety remain at the same level. And that could be as part of the perception of the crimes that have occurred. Some of those high profile crimes have created a lot of concern. We want our community to feel safe. We want them to actually be safe and feel safe, right? So it's the reality and the perception. And fortunately, moving into 2021, the public safety funding has remained pretty stable and consistent. So we are still looking at how can we address these challenges that we see in the community, these public safety challenges. I will say, we haven't mentioned this yet so far here today, that our call for services regarding people who are in some form of crisis continue to increase. 2020, this year, tail into 2019, we started what's called an embedded social worker program. And so we were able to actually get crisis response reports in the hands of a social worker either the same day or the very next day, which is a dramatic improvement in service from where we were prior to having the social worker working within the police department. And we continue to see that that position be significant workload or caseload, but also significant positive results with the people that she's dealing with, as she can quickly get services directed to and connected to the people who need them. And so for 2021, we are trying to increase our capacity for that program through the use of a grant. We're always actively looking for ways to utilize grant dollars instead of increased budget dollars to support these programs. And so fortunately, I think we've secured the grant money to double our embedded social worker resources and go from 1 to 2. And so we want to see, ultimately, we'd like to see the number of responses to those calls decrease, but more importantly, we just want to make sure that we're able to connect those folks who are in crisis in some form with the social worker services that allows them to stay out of crisis. So sometimes that means reconnecting an individual with a caseworker, and the second social worker is going to have an emphasis and focus on chemical addiction issues, drug and alcohol addiction issues, and trying to oftentimes get that individual perhaps into a treatment facility. And what we see after we're able to successfully connect the individual with the resources they need, our calls for service specifically to crisis situations just decrease almost automatically or immediately. So the program works. It's just a matter of finding the resources to to bring that second person in. And like I said, we've located a grant to do that without an impact to our city budget. Great.
I know Officer Brown mentioned this earlier, and it's it's a difficult subject, but I have to bring it up in terms of you mentioned civil unrest and a lot of the issues around racial equity and racial justice, and being at the front line and maybe at the center of attention on a lot of this work. How do you view that as part of your job in terms of on a daily basis, but also moving forward from maybe thinking things differently or however? I mean, I don't want it to be too broad, but it's a reality of our everyday lives. So how does it impact you, and where do you see it going?
Well, first I'll start off with the City of Bloomington City Council has been very proactive in adopting our racial equity business plan. We understand this is a priority here in the City of Bloomington, and within the police department since May, June, we have tried to do a couple of different things. And I'll talk, first of all, we are doing more messaging to the community about the work that we do. We want our community to feel like our organization is transparent and is addressing the issues that are occurring within our community. And so very early on, we started to do more messaging and asking for more input from our community about the work that the police department does. We have made a number of changes in terms of information that we're providing on an ongoing basis to the community, starting off with just making our policy manual available for the community to see on our website. Additionally, we uploaded a complaint form to our website, so individuals from our community who have concerns or complaints about the work that we're doing, we've made it much easier for them to communicate those. They can do that anonymously even. And we're going to do, and we're actually working on a project now to increase transparency in the area of data sharing. There's a lot of interest in the work that we do and how it breaks down by race. And so we're in the process of creating a dashboard on our website that would show the community, you know, when it comes to arrests, contacts with our community, what the racial breakdown is of that. We think that will be done here probably within the next couple of months. We're working internally to do that. We have had a large number of community virtual meetings with the various demographics within Bloomington. We do them just very similar to how this meeting is going. We do them on a virtual platform. We listen to the questions and concerns. We respond to questions. And internally, sometimes it leads to policy changes. Sometimes it leads to, you know, a particular policy that we're implementing being shared with the community groups to get their input before we implement it. I think all of that work is really being done to be a transparent organization, one that continues to be trusted by the community. Our most recent community survey did indicate strong support from the community. Now it's down a little bit from the previous year. When I say a little bit, 2019, we had 90% of the responses indicating that the police service was either good or excellent, a category similar to that. In the 2020 survey, it was just conducted kind of late summer, early fall. Instead of 90% of those ratings indicating good or excellent, it was 85. So there was and when, according to the rating industry organization, that is a trend that was kind of seen nationwide, but actually at a higher rate than 5% downward deviation. So we'll continue to monitor that. Maintaining the trust and confidence from our community is critical to us doing our work. And we're open to ideas and suggestions that the community has that we can do our work better. We're going to lean into that. We're going to, not only during 2020, but here in 2021, we're going to continue working on that. We have formed a racial equity action team within the police department to try to identify or issue spot areas where racial equity may be a concern. All departments within the city have taken on that work, and we're excited about that work. We're excited about where it's going to take us, and we'll continue working on that for, like I said, not just 2021, but for years to come.
Another topic too is that a couple of us went to an implicit bias and a fair and impartial training. A couple of us went to a train the trainer session. It was a 2-day where all the information that we got from that, we're going to bring it back to the police department. So I know that's a big topic these days on the fair and impartial policing. We have a lot of good information, a lot of content that we're going to share with our officers. So that'll be probably happen sometime next year. We also, I think, kind of back to the basics, just ask an officer. We have a program where one of our officers launched it, and he was really active in, he made flyers. We sent it to businesses, neighborhoods, basically anyone living or working in Bloomington. And he got a pretty good response, but it's just basically, if you have a question for us, please ask. And he was, and this was before some of the kind of stricter or some of the restrictions, but this officer or any of us, we'd visit people in their homes, we'd call them, we'd email them, however kind of method of contact this person wanted. And simply, sometimes the public sees us when we're in the middle of a job duty, whether it's out in the community, dealing with a call for service, or sitting on a traffic accident, where it's, obviously probably not appropriate for someone to come up and ask us a question. So this gives anyone in our community an opportunity to ask us basically anything they want. So, a lot of times people are unsure about something or have maybe not a positive view if maybe they just don't know something or just uneducated on something that we do or how we portray ourselves. So we welcome anybody, if you have a question, to please ask us.
Yeah. Well, as we wrap up here, I really appreciate everything that you're doing, but also taking the time in particular this morning. If you're able to leave us with some kind of, you seem positive despite being tired from the work that you're doing in terms of, I think, just the the new normal, as the saying goes. Just a little bit in terms of what you're hopeful for and how the business community in particular might be able to support your work.
I think, like I had mentioned earlier, just with the civil unrest, it really gave people more of an opportunity to reach out for us and to obtain that partnership. And again, I don't have contacts from every single business in Bloomington. My goal is to get more. I think I get at least 1 or 2 more every week. But just, I think just maintain a partnership, get to know other businesses in the community, get to know your customers, stay safe, stay vigilant. Bloomington is working hard for you. We're here anytime you need us, whether it's an emergency situation, whether it's just a question for us, or what are some safety tips? What are some trends going around in the community? We're open, we're transparent. We'll do anything in our power to keep you, your business safe, and any type of communication, or if you want me to stop out if you feel safe, or any flyers or any kind of safety tips you want to pass on to your customers or to people that work with you in your business, we always have something like that, or we can make one. So we're working 24 hours, and we just want people to know that it's a safe community, and we're here for you, whether it's pandemic, whether it's civil unrest. We never stop working. We're always here. We're always showing up. So we appreciate also that the feedback and the communication that I have with my business contacts. I appreciate that too. That makes my job a lot easier. And so I want to thank everyone on here too for showing up and for caring. So thank you.
And Brett, I'll just I'll kind of echo a little bit about what Erica said there, but also I just want to say thanks to Erica for really stepping up in 2020 and leading this work. Not only the work with communicating and partnering with our businesses, but really leading our organization through how we're kind of handling all these different things that are coming at us during 2020. She has done an amazing job, kind of a testament to the quality of the people that work here. That really Erica is still fairly new to this work, but she has definitely embraced it and kind of worked to lean into all these challenges and put us in a position where I think through a really difficult year, honestly, I think the community, the relationship we have with the community and the trust with the community has grown because of the work of like what Erica has done. I hope the community knows that we are going to be here for you. Whatever your challenges are, please don't hesitate to give us a call. We're doing our best to take care of our staff here physically and mentally. 2020 is a new year, a new project for us where we, all of our officers now are going to have an annual mental health checkup. This is a new program that we think is critically important to keeping our officers mentally healthy throughout long careers where they see a whole lot of things that are just, they leave emotional scars. And so this year we started the program. There's been great feedback on it. We continue to have a physical fitness requirement and program here to try to keep our officers healthy physically. And we do that just to make sure that, A, it's just the right thing to do, but B, it's, we need to have healthy officers to go out there and effectively do the work in the community. And so, again, I want to thank the folks who are on the call here today, but just know that we're here for you. If you have concerns, issues, you want help solving some, challenges, as it relates to public safety, do not hesitate to give us a call. We're not too busy to try to do whatever we can to help you out. Please let us know what those challenges or questions are, and we'll do our best to help you solve them.
Thank you so much, Chief Potts and Officer Brown. A really important discussion, and thank you to everybody who was on the call. Thanks again to the sponsors for the program, Mall of America, Centerpoint Energy, Wells Fargo, and Xcel Energy. I'd be remiss if I didn't say there's plenty of opportunities for sponsorship to continue with this great programming. And I got through this whole thing without dealing with animal control, making you talk turkey and asking Penny for your thoughts. So that'll be another time. But everybody have a great rest of the week, and stay safe, and happy holidays to everyone. We'll see you in 2021. Bye now.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Have a great holiday season.